Yeah, it's the TANG gang. Yeah, it's the TANG gang. TANG gang. It's the TANG gang. TANG gang. Yeah, it's the TANG gang. TANG gang. Yeah, it's the TANG gang. TANG gang. Yeah, it's the TANG gang. Yeah. It's the TANG gang. TANG gang. TANG gang. TANG gang. Yeah, it's the TANG gang. Yeah, I got an idea. Let's take these beliefs and bad ideas and let's stack them up. Stack them up and see if these people can back them up. And if not, this is what you can do is just pack them up and go on your way. Cause you should have known, everybody at TANG, we don't play now. Yeah, we need that evidence. We need that evidence to make shit relevant. So what you saying? What you saying, man? Can you prove it? What you doing? Let's do it. Y'all already know. Y'all already know. TANG gang. Y'all already know, 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 y'all already know. TANG gang.
All right, what's up, everybody? Oz here as usual, and I have my new friend here, Guy, with me. Guy, thanks for hanging out with me, and we're going to chop it up and talk about beliefs, faith, things like that. So, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Very good, very good. And I contacted. Let's start here. So, Guy, what church is it that you attend?
I go to Trinity Evangelical Church. It's a small, non-denominational church.
Okay.
In town.
And I contacted Guy's church in an attempt to start sitting down and talking about, again, belief and faith and things like that with pastors or church, leadership, things like that. And they were one of the churches that were kind enough to respond and set a time. And here we are. So, Guy, obviously, like you just shared, it's a evangelical or more non-denominational. As far as theology, obviously it's a Christian church.
Yeah.
Adheres to the Christian Bible, but do you guys believe in the Trinity, a triune God? What's the outlook on that?
It's a historic Orthodox church with regard to the foundational creeds of the 4th century. So we would be considered a conservative, theologically conservative church. But in a narrow sense of evangelical.
Okay. And then,
but not fundamentalists. I've heard you describe like churches. You'll say evangelical, but then there's also sort of a charismatic evangelical. We'd be more of a. I often say that we're kind of a measured, nerdy evangelical.
Okay. I can handle nerdy. I get my wife and stepkids call me macho geek because it's like I always well, I still dress like where I come from,
Yeah.
but I'm a nerd, so so I could appreciate that. And Guy, how long have you been a believer?
That's an interesting question. I grew up Catholic and had a fondness for the church. But I would say that I got serious when I became a Protestant, more specifically, probably in my early 20s. So, 100 years now?
Close.
Roughly.
No, you told me your age earlier. I won't reveal it, but you told me your age earlier, so I know it's not 100. So when the conversion from Catholicism to Protestant, or at least representing that, what did that experience look like for you?
Well, when I grew up, I always had I never had a reason to reject, and always had an intuitive acceptance and understanding of the transcendence. I think one of the things about being raised in Catholic Church is that they, if you go to one of the historic churches in town, you get a sense that they're trying to build something to put you in the presence of something that's rather transcendent. So I was always at home with that, but the Catholic Church doesn't do a very good job of engaging people. So as they lose tons of young people, they're really hemorrhaging as a result of it. And that's there's all kinds of reasons, but one of them is they don't really offer any sort of challenging. They don't offer an adventure and a challenge of what it means to be Catholic. So I drifted out into high school because I was at one time a catechism a poster boy because I was always the favorite of my teachers because I was really interested in it. But then I got into high school and got diverted. And then sowed my oats in my 20s, and I think got tired of that after a while, and always played in Christian bands though throughout that whole thing. I was always sensitive to, although I'm an absolutely no angel, I was always sensitive to the more extreme scene of rock and roll. And so essentially what happened was a friend of mine that I was in a band with, who was a believer, introduced me to this guy who was a pretty serious believer, and he wanted to learn how to play guitar, and I was at the time pretty good. And so we would spend time together, and we would play, and then we would watch. I remember watching an R.C. Sproul series on World Views. So I was out of the Catholic faith, had a propensity to be interested in it, and then was exposed to really an overview of competing and contrasting worldviews and why out of all that Christianity makes the most sense. And so I was sort of weaned and baptized really into the Protestant faith with this comparative analysis of worldviews. And so ever since then, that's kind of been the trajectory. Just I had an intuition, and I knew some things, but that comparative piece put it into context and made really good sense for me. I don't know if I'm rambling too much.
No, you're good. You're good. I'll just make sure my screen stayed lit. So in that process of, I want to make sure I don't use wrong verbiage or anything, because I know each denomination, whatever kind of approaches it a little differently, but through the conversion process or being saved, or what was that because I've heard some people say, well, God spoke to me. Some people said, well, I felt the presence of God. Some people say they felt a conviction. Do you remember what it was that did that?
These are good questions, and this is where I've never had quite the storyline that a lot of people have had. I think that I always had an awareness, in my view, of the reality of my Creator, and I never overtly rejected it. So I guess I did get baptized when I was a Protestant because I wanted to make a commitment a irrational individual coming in other than Baptist and Catholic. But I think I don't think there was, but I don't know that I can pinpoint. It was a gradual awakening and a sort of an ongoing, if you want to say sanctification, an ongoing refinement of my sensitivities. So there wasn't a walking down the aisle sort of deal. There wasn't any catastrophic event in my life. I just think that I was. Had I stayed a Catholic and found a serious avenue in Catholicism, I would have just said I was baptized when I was an infant, and I accepted the reality of the presence of a Creator.
Okay.
So that's, I don't know if that's an okay explanation.
Well,
It's great
I
because
think
I rarely get the opportunity to sort of try to articulate. This is why I was really attracted to this, because I rarely get an opportunity to. What I find fascinating is people who aren't believers tend to be more interested in talking about this kind of stuff than a lot of the broader Christians.
Yeah. Oh, I agree, because I remember when I was a Christian, it was like I had no problem going out and doing street witnessing and apologetics and all that, but only if I get to ask you the question. I'm not answering questions. Okay, and then so and I think that is everybody's story when it comes to a religious or a spiritual conversion or what have you. It is kind of like a snowflake where I think each one looks different, appears different, and all that. So through
Some
that,
melt faster than others.
yeah, absolutely. So through that, then what where you're at current day, what is it that still convinces a guy to hold true to this belief, and how are you today convinced that God is real?
Well, I think it's that initial awareness, and then the ongoing relationship that I have with my Creator, and how in various ways I substantiate that through a cumulative case. So I've never had a positive reason to reject it,
okay,
which is one of the things that hopefully we'll get into a conversation about, because what I found by listening to you and by seeing people who are agnostic or challenge it often tends to be a negative case for disbelief. And I've never in the time that I spent on, and I set that up on purpose for that Harsh Scroll thing, because that's kind of the way I've always approached my faith. I've compared it. I found other things wanting in a sort of cumulative case, and I think there are good reasons to do it. So I think it's just now the degree to which I get weak is the degree to which I become lazy, and I don't bother to meditate on those things and think about them. That's been another interesting part, is just kind of getting ready for this and listening to your stuff. Getting back into the dialogue has been something I've realized that, man, I've been a little sleep at the wheel in terms of that, which lots of Christians can do, because they get into it just like any group you get into. You can be self-congratulatory and not really continue to engage with competing interests.
Yeah, and that's why I love this, because it's even with the street epistemology, model or line of questioning, whatever you want to call it. We can do it with any deeply held belief, whether it's religion, politics, and my conviction is, if all of us did this more often, not just with religion, but even other topics, we'd probably have a little healthier society, because we'd know how to communicate, and listen.
We would, and that's and for a lot of people have lost the tools for that. And you can blame that on lots of different things, but we've lost the tools to engage in sort of classical liberal approach to public engagement. All kinds of issues.
Totally agreed. So now we'll now that we have a little bit of background understanding of how a guy, went from youth Catholicism, now Protestant, and kind of what that experiences look like. I like to use a scale.
Yeah.
As far as what we call it, a confidence scale. So as far as the existence of, we can either say the Yahweh God, or we can just say a God in general. What is your confidence level, 0 to 10? 0 being there is no God, and 10 being I know that there's a God. Where would you fall on that scale?
Well, let me make an answer by saying one can never be 100% sure about anything.
Absolutely.
So I guess I would say it centers around 9, and maybe goes to 9.5, and maybe goes to 7.5.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's you being honest. I appreciate that.
But it probably centers around as high a degree of certainty as I think one could probably have. And I'm sure there are many other people that are more certain than I am.
Yeah. I talked to
him. and ones that have probably better reasons to be more certain than me, so I'm looking at the positive side. But yeah, I mean, relative to, and I think that comes from being open and examining alternatives and saying that everyone is a degree of uncertainty, and the question is, in a cumulative total case, how are you certain about anything? I'm pretty certain my wife loves me, primarily because she's an awesome person, but she's not the same kind of person as me, so she's not as expressive, but I look at the totality of it, and I can be pretty closer.
Yeah.
Now, if you asked her, she would say her love for me goes probably from a 9.5 down to a 9.
You seem like a nice guy. I don't think that. And I do like that you use the example of husband and wife, because I've had others use that example with me, and I actually like to use that because that is because for those of us that are married, we know that's for a healthy relationship, healthy marriage, that's a love that runs very, very deep.
Yeah.
And my wife, I say all the time, I would die and kill for that woman in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And I know that she loves me, just like you said that, with your wife. And the difference between me knowing that my wife loves me and knowing that there's a God there that loves me is I have demonstrated evidence to support my wife showing me love. That, the way she, even going through this last week, as you and I were talking about off camera, she's been amazing.
Yeah.
And all of that is evidence of her and her love for me. I can't necessarily substantiate that can't necessarily align that with the God's love, because I can't put a finger on it. You know what I mean? We can't measure that a thing that happens to me is via God, that we could see as love or grace or compassion. We can't say, oh, well, that came from God, because we can't measure that. We don't have that. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
So I do appreciate that example, because that's what I'm on my side of it. That's what I'm looking for, and that's why I'm having these conversations over and over and over again. And I appreciate your honesty on the scale, because anytime somebody goes straight to 10, I'm like, here we go, because we're human.
Yes.
We're human. And I remember even before, when I was 100% convinced believer, there were days, weeks, whatever, where I was like, where you at, man? Where you at, God? And I had those days, so I appreciate when people are honest on that scale, because that makes the conversation more fruitful when we're intellectually being honest, with each other. So then following up on that scale, could you, when it comes to Yahweh, could you be wrong?
Yes, I could be. That's not that questionnaire you gave me. I didn't want to answer it in a way, because I was like, I always felt like I needed to write some sort of I needed to preface the answer, contextualize the answer. Yeah, I absolutely can, and I have been.
Yeah.
And even on theological things that I thought I understood, on further reflection, I realized I was incorrect.
Yeah. Even on the atheist side, there's still stuff, like you said, theologically, that I thought I had the right understanding or interpretation. I was like, oh no, I according to original Hebrew or whatever, I was way off. So I think we're all as humans prone to being incorrect.
Yeah.
So my follow-up then, in knowing that, and I'll say from the atheist side, I could be wrong. Just again, so we're being consistent and honest.
I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, as you should. What would have to happen, or what would it take to rattle that? Let's call it the 9. What would have to happen in the guy or in guy's life to start to rattle that 9?
Well, I can't conceive of what would happen. I mean, we were talking before about losing parents and lost a sister, and I think that part of developing a sound biblical worldview is to understand things that happen to you and things that happen in the world in a proper way, so that they're not used as weapons or tools to because if God exists, which I believe He does, that is independent of how I experience and how I perceive or interpret an experience. And I have to be really careful of that, because I know that depression and despair, in my view, is about there are people that have serious chemical imbalances, but for a lot of people, including myself when I've been in it, and I have, is a big part of me looking inward and spiraling down into something where there's no way out, because I'm continuing to spiral my own thoughts down into a dark place, and that's a decision I make, and so I run. So all that yapping to say that I'm not too sure I could give you a scenario for that, because in the church that I go to and the way that I've been discipled with the faith is to understand the totality of life and all these things that can happen and why they happen the way they do. So why do people do evil things? Well, there's a reason for that. But why do I get myself into consequences? Now, with regard to evidence or that sort of thing, I could probably be the same sort of standard that Paul had if you could make a really, really strong case that Jesus didn't die and rise from the dead, and that was and it meant a real serious scholastic criticism and peer review that might cause me concern.
Okay.
I'd have to spend some time digging down into that. So that's kind of the answer.
How much of your belief or your conviction is in or through the text?
Well, quite a bit. But I may look at the text as not as narrowly as you and your comrades do with regard to. I do think it is history, and so. But I also understand historic texts to be a combination of quite a few things. So yeah, it would be heavily involved, and not only the text, but partially a little bit of the tradition, but certainly the text itself.
Okay. And then, so go listening through, and this is where I always kind of reflect and ask, so I can make sure I'm clear as we go through the conversation. So most of what I've heard so far has been your own journey, so your own personal experience with you and God. And then obviously we just talked about the Bible does play a part. I think almost every Christian's gonna say that.
Yeah.
Where does faith come into the equation with you?
Well, faith is the trust and acceptance and commitment of what and a response of what I do. So faith, the definition and how that's played out in Christian circles is interesting. You might have extremes that say that, and there have been extremes that say faith is, despite all the evidence, faith is really faith when it's done in spite of it. But that wouldn't. I don't think that's the Bible's view, and that wouldn't be my view. My view would be like the Hebrews view, where they said all these big players in the Bible story had faith because they had already seen what was demonstrated to them by Yahweh, and so they were willing to go and go into that next phase because they acted by faith. They acted on what they had already seen and understood nature. So I guess that's it. And then my faith would be my commitment to so my response to what I know is true.
Okay, and
so it's not a blind leap. It might be an extension. It might be a trust of those things that I can't know, that I can't have complete confidence in, because of what I do have confidence in, what I do understand to be solid, what extends beyond that. And so it's not an irrational piece. It's what Bishop Barron would say is an extension. I don't know if you've ever seen Bishop Barron.
I'm familiar with the name. I don't know.
He's an interesting cat. You've enjoyed him. And so he would say that it doesn't contradict rationality, but it goes beyond it. In a sense.
Okay.
That's really a oversimplification.
No, I understand what you're saying. Because when I hear that, I put my Christian hat back on, and I automatically go back to we're saved by grace through faith. So through faith would mean that would be our vehicle to salvation, or then go to one of the more extreme, in my opinion, extreme scriptures. We walk by faith and not by sight. So it doesn't matter what you see around you. That may suggest one thing or another. That you're walking by your faith. You're walking by faith and trusting the faith in whatever the God or whatever that's in front of you, regardless of the things you're seeing and experiencing.
Well, with regard to that, it might be we have faith in what we know is true, despite whatever particular circumstances in front of us might cause us to lose, that would cause us to run away from them.
Okay, and then
because that whole story in the Old Testament is they see God work, they get themselves into a situation that they start to get confused and lack faith and lack confidence, and they start to fall back on, that's when they start to fall back on bad practices, is because they're not reacting properly to what they've already been exposed to.
Okay, and then
That makes sense.
I 100% get it. And then the saved by grace through faith. How do you interpret that? Maybe that'll help.
Well, I think that the Orthodox perspective on that, there's in Protestant camps there's some division about how that works out.
Yeah.
But generally, God has provided a way of communion for us, and then we have the responsibility to respond to that, just like the Israelites did in the Old Testament. He presented a contract, and he was the guarantor of the contract, and their obligation was to honor that by representing it properly. So I think that's the same sort of thing. God's provided grace, He's provided the means by which, these things and stuff. And our response to that is then strengthened through that connection.
Okay. So
it's a grace faith thing, I think. That's a rough, without getting into the weeds, I think that's.
Yeah, and then I know.
So it's not a contingent on me, just like I could give you a present and I could pay your house off. You're accepting that gift. And then if there was some sort of relationship, contingent on a decent relationship between the two of us, it's not really anything you're doing for me, but you're recognizing it in a relationship of thankfulness with me, and brotherly love, that sort of.
So to repeat it back, so make sure I heard it and I don't straw man you or anything. So faith is well, in Scripture I was using saved by grace through faith. Faith is part of, to you, faith is part of the gift given, but not a vehicle, because I see it as a vehicle used.
Yeah, I'd have to.
Yeah, because there is a lot there, and I'm trying to go back to my old New Testament history classes.
Yeah, I'm trying to be careful not to perpetuate this idea that's pretty common, that faith is somehow contrary to and some sort of subjective commitment despite objective realities.
I think, I think what happens, and again, forget about the atheist part right now, just being a skeptic and trying to play it down the middle and figure out what's true and what's not. I think that people do take that word and run with it. But within the text, when we're talking about the God claim, I see it, especially in that scripture, I've always seen it as the vehicle, and faith is used specifically for that conversation in a belief, regardless of presence or lack of evidence.
I see.
And
well, yes, you could have a belief and a trust and a right. So, despite and in spite of whatever might be objectively, I think it's a response to and a continual action in a trust and a appreciation and a love for what has been done for you through grace, so that God's grace is provided, and your response to that and your trust is really your act of faith.
Okay, and all right, I think we move forward a little bit there. So the faith and the trust, and knowing either what God did or what God through Christ did for the believer, whether we use the word trust or faith, because you look up dictionary standard definition as ultimate faith says ultimate trust in a thing, in someone or something, so yeah, okay, so we can use that, kind of combine that, because I think no, that's why we have these conversations, because I was
gearing up myself for sort of different kinds of questions.
So my favorite question is, so what we use that word trust as in faith kind of simultaneously, like the Bible's doing. In your personal experience in life, can faith or that kind of trust or faith lead us to true and untrue things?
Well, yeah, because it's yes.
Okay, and then knowing that, and again, whether it's we're talking about God or a career or whatever it is, would we, in any other realm of life, would we look at that and say that is a reliable pathway or reliable vehicle for us to use to arrive to more true things than not.
Well, I'm not too sure that there isn't any there that that's not what's done in any other aspect of life. I mean, if you drive a car, you have a certain trust or confidence that statistically you're going to be okay when you get to your destination, even though you can't be certain that you're going to get to your destination.
But you have reliable data and demonstration that shows that you've backed your car to your driveway how many times.
Right, but yeah, and that's why I was trying to say before that I think both in the Old and New Testament stories and in a cumulative case for understanding presenting the positive case for the existence of God and the resurrection of Christ. The Christian would argue that those are knowable and make positive cases for them. And then on that basis, you can put a cumulative case together, and that would be no different. I mean, it wouldn't be. It would not any different, but it would be the same principle and methodologies that would be applied to some other things that we do, and that we act on certain trusts and faith because we have prior experiences.
Okay. And obviously you know yourself, and I think most other people are going to be watching this in the future know that I'm a former believer, now atheist, and I haven't found the evidence or the argument that convinces me. Yeah. So when even when I hear that still goes back to I'm trying to figure out how we get back to God, because I still hear faith, whether we disagree on terms or not. I still hear faith, because there's nothing. Let me ask this: how could we?
And then I get asked.
Yes, absolutely. Is there a way to test, or is there a method we can use to check the reliability of your methods and how you're arriving to your belief in God? Can we test that? Is there a method to do that?
With respect to the historical record, yes, I think so. I think like you can test any other historical record. And then I think
you mean the Bible, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I think you could, but if we're just talking on the realm of theism, I think that you could make good cumulative cases, both using philosophy and science, to make good positive cases.